I think what's really apparent is how powerful and important these issues are, and that it's something we need the entire GLAM sector to take more responsibility and ownership of, that we can't just hide behind white fella guilt and paralysis, and that we really need to be, as a sector, working towards self-determined approaches to how material in collections are managed. I had a series of questions I was going to ask, but I'm aware that we're already moving into the afternoon tea break. So I might just throw it straight to the floor and see if there are any questions from the floor.
I'll start with an easy one then while others are thinking.
Now I'm on. Sorry, my fault. Which is, I have one. It's not specifically for Terri, but based on the talks, I suspect Terri will be the best answerer. You mentioned that we do need to change the law. We need to introduce regulation. Is there anybody in the world who's doing it right? Is there somebody we can copy? And is it possible to copy in this space, or do you have to be unique for every country, do you think?
Well, I guess all countries are trying to introduce legislation, and some of the countries that have the Indigenous populations as majority populations have laws that deal with it. And it's probably too early to tell how they're going, but what I like is that it's shifting the system. So I think what the protocols show, and the work that Karen and Kirsten are saying, Kirsten, you got me doing it too now. Kirsten is saying, is that it can be done if we have the goodwill to do it. I know, and a lot of you in this room would know, we've been looking at this issue of whether there should be laws for many years, and it's always been said, well, it's too hard. How does it fit with the existing copyright, the fundamentals, and it's requiring quite a shift. But you've just seen two great examples of how institutions have dealt with that, and it can be done. And I think that the more that we do it that way, it's going to start a standards that institutions will know. People think it's hard at the start, but it's actually not. I'm reluctant to look at any other countries' models because we are so unique in Australia. I think not only do we have Indigenous people as a minority, we have like hundreds of different Indigenous nations. So the solution, I think, will be coming from Australia, won't it? It'll be a solution from us. But if you just look at what's happening now, I think if we build on, a protocols model, giving Indigenous people recognising that right, it can be done.
And I think you're right that maybe if once we start doing it and it becomes kind of second nature, it won't seem nearly so hard to legislate for. Hopefully.
Yes.
Hello, I'm Melanie Johnson from New Zealand, and I've been asked to look at the issue of copyright and the Human Ethics Participants Committee and writing guidelines for staff. And one of the solutions I thought which may work would be for researchers going into communities and making films or recording traditional knowledge to assign the copyright that they acquire automatically back to the community. But when it's owned collectively by the community, how would you manage?
Well, you'd have to have that conversation, and maybe you could explain those three different levels of your clearance forms.
Yes, I actually think you're the expert, Terri, but just to give an example, with some of the Batchelor Institute press publications, and Batchelor Institute Press always assigns copyright to the creators unless they ask to have it somewhere else. So those clan-owned stories, the copyright is assigned to the Languages Centre. Another thing that happens with Batchelor Institute press publications is that people's names are not on the front of the book, and particularly non-Indigenous contributors who have been doing the work through the Institute, they're not put on the book as the illustrator or the editor or the whatever. They're on the imprint page, they're acknowledged. But I think, and that came through consultation, what people wanted to do there. And I think looking at the and approach is a way to go. But you have to have the consultation and ask people what do they want to do. Another community might have a completely different approach. So I guess in some ways the guidelines and the protocols are to ask and have the proper conversation, because you can't have one solution fits all. What do you think, Terri?
I agree. Well answered. She's also a lawyer too.
Hi, my name's Lydia. I'm from IATSIS. We've been talking to Karen and Mari about possibly licensing the end user licenses that you've developed with Terri Janke, and also with Kim, Kirsten and Jane Anderson. And I'm just wondering how we could get like a more sort of standardised system across the sector. Maybe look at licensing them, or do we develop our own?
Well, I think they're very useful. It's very much something that came out of, you know, the needs for this project, but I think they're very useful because a lot of thought has gone into them. And when did we meet, Karen? When we first?
2005 or something, I think.
Where we started working on this, and they are useful. I think it's a model. I mean, there's one model. I mean, State Library of New South Wales has similar developing agreements too, but I agree we need to have some sort of system that we can share, and yeah, it would be good.
I think it would be good to have a forum about these issues for collections and language centres and libraries to come to discuss it, because I think often, as you've said, the issue is people don't know what to do. But I do think collections are different and they have particular needs, and the communities they work with might have particular ideas about how they want materials managed. But I do think it is good to share ideas and to come have models, clear models. What do you think, Kirsten? Because you've...
Yeah, I definitely see a need for discussion and sharing of resources. That's my biggest frustration, is the amount of investment that goes in, and then you know, if the funding's short term, then it's not rolled out. So we need to both experiment but share our failings and share the things that are working. One of the projects that is associated with the wider Mukurtu project is a site in the US called Sustainable Heritage Network, and what I really like about that is communities are putting up guides as simple things like whether it's physical preservation, this is how you make a box, this is our curriculum around digital stewardship. So there's a whole level of resources that are being made accessible through Creative Commons so that people are attributed, but they can basically put them up there to say, please don't reinvent the wheel because there might be something here. And I think one of our challenges in Australia is we end up becoming quite competitive federally, state by state, across sort of the research data space of people having, whether it's ARC-funded research projects. And it's really unfortunate because communities are the ones that miss out. And as Terri said before, we're actually replicating colonial collecting paradigms in the work that we do. And my greatest fear is that, you know, for my son, or if we're talking about little ones, that they won't know where the collections are in the future because we haven't addressed this now.
Any other questions? How are we doing for time? Or about 20 minutes late. All right, we might wrap it up there. certainly I think there's a lot to take away from it. So I think ideally, and certainly why ADA is interested in this, is that this is the start of a conversation, not the end of one. So certainly we encourage you to speak to our, to talk to our three speakers in the breaks, but also to have a think about how your institutions and how you within your institutions can start to take a more positive role in addressing these kinds of things in your collections. Thank you very much.